The scream of the pumpkin patch.
On the outskirts of the old town, where houses slowly crumbled under the onslaught of time, and the only inhabitants were ghosts of the past, stretched a vast pumpkin field. It belonged to the McGregor family, who for generations had grown the largest and orangest pumpkins here, which had become a symbol of Halloween for the entire region. But this year something was wrong. With the arrival of autumn, when the first frosts touched the grass, strange sounds began to emanate from the field. At first, it was a quiet whisper that could be attributed to the wind playing with dry leaves. Then the whisper turned into moans, and then into piercing screams that chilled the blood.
The locals, who had first laughed at the fears, soon began to avoid the field. They said that at night, if you listened closely, you could distinguish words in those screams, pleas for help, curses, and even eerie, distorted laughter. The police, called by concerned townspeople, conducted several searches, but found nothing. The field was empty. Only thousands of pumpkins, large and small, silently rose above the ground, their orange sides seeming to smile ominously in the lantern light. The McGregors, pale with fear and shame, tried to explain the events as pranks by neighborhood teenagers, but no one believed them. How could teenagers explain these blood-curdling screams that continued every night, growing louder and more desperate?
On Halloween night, as the entire town was immersed in an atmosphere of festive madness, and children in monster and witch costumes went door to door begging for sweets, the screams from the pumpkin field reached their climax. They merged into a single, terrifying chorus. It seemed as if the field itself was moaning and screaming in pain. Several teenagers who decided to check the rumors and prove their bravery went to the field with flashlights. Among them was Jake, a guy who had always been a skeptic and didn't believe in any ghosts. "It's just the wind, guys, and someone's silly jokes," he sneered, lighting the way with his flashlight.
As they approached the edge of the field, the wind intensified, bringing not only the smell of damp leaves, but something else, a putrid, sweetish aroma that made the boys' throats itch. The screams, which had seemed distant before, now sounded so close, as if someone was standing right behind them. One of the boys, little and timid Timmy, began to tremble. "I can't, Jake. I'm scared," he whispered, clinging to his friend's jacket. Jake, although he felt a chill run down his spine, tried to keep his composure. "We'll just walk along the edge, see what's there, and come back. Nothing bad will happen."
But as soon as they took their first steps between the rows of pumpkins, something changed. The moon, which had been hiding behind clouds, emerged, illuminating the field with an ominous silver light. The pumpkins seemed to come alive. Their carved faces, which looked amusing during the day, now contorted into grimaces of horror and agony. From each opening where eyes should have been, some dark liquid dripped, like tears or blood. And the screams, they now came not from somewhere far away, but directly from the pumpkins. Each pumpkin, large and small, let out its own unique scream. Female, child, male, piercing, stifled, full of despair.
"What is that?" Timmy cried, pointing a trembling finger at one of the pumpkins. Inside it, through the carved holes, something pulsating and reddish, like a heart, could be seen. Jake, numb with terror, noticed that the pumpkins began to move slowly. At first, it was almost imperceptible, a slight swaying as if from the wind. But then they began to turn towards them, their horrific faces focused on the teenagers. And the screams? They grew louder, calling to them, luring them deeper into the field.
The boys ran. The wind whistled in their ears. The screams of the pumpkins pursued them. It seemed as if they were breathing down their necks. One by one, they stumbled, fell, but got up and ran further, gripped by panic. Only Jake, despite all the horror, stopped for a moment to look back, and what he saw remained forever in his memory. The pumpkins, thousands of pumpkins, rose from the ground, their roots stretching out, turning into gnarled fingers, and their stalks writhing like snakes. They reached for them, their terrifying mouths opening in a silent scream, full of razor-sharp teeth. Jake ran as he had never run in his life. He ran until he collapsed out of the field, gasping for breath, his lungs burning with pain. When he looked back, the field was motionless again. The pumpkins stood in their places as if nothing had happened. Only the screams, they still came from deep within the field, now more muffled, but just as terrifying. Of the 5 teenagers who went into the pumpkin field on that fateful Halloween night, only 3 returned. Timmy and another boy, whose name no one could ever remember, disappeared without a trace. Their searches yielded nothing.
Since then, the McGregor pumpkin field has been abandoned. No one dares to step on its cursed ground anymore. But every Halloween night, when the wind whistles through the dry stalks and the moon hangs high in the sky, screams still come from the field. And if you are brave enough to listen, you might distinguish in them not only moans and curses, but also new, fresh voices that have joined the chorus of the pumpkin field, becoming a part of it, a part of its endless, terrifying scream. And who knows, perhaps on one of those nights, if you get close enough, one of the pumpkins will open its mouth, and you will see within its dark womb a pulsating heart that once beat in the chest of one of those who dared to disturb the peace of the cursed field. Or perhaps it will simply extend its gnarled roots to you, to pull you down into eternal darkness, where you will become a new voice in the pumpkin field's chorus.
The Old House on the Hill.
On the highest hill, at the edge of town, stood an old mansion. Its walls, once majestic, were now dilapidated, and its windows were boarded up, like the closed eyes of a dead giant. Rumor had it that a terrible tragedy occurred in this house many years ago, and since then no family had been able to live there. Everyone who dared to buy or rent it soon fled, consumed by terror, recounting chilling sounds, ghostly shadows, and inexplicable occurrences. The house became a place of legends, where every Halloween celebration was accompanied by new stories of its curse. This year, a group of paranormal research students, led by the ambitious Lisa, decided to spend Halloween night in the house. They were convinced that all these stories were nothing more than fabrications, and any paranormal phenomena could be rationally explained. Their goal was to debunk the myth and prove that ghosts do not exist. They brought with them an arsenal of equipment: night vision cameras, motion sensors, voice recorders, thermometers, and even electromagnetic detectors. "We'll show everyone that this is just an old house and nothing more," Lisa confidently declared as they pulled up to the mansion in an old van. Her team, consisting of 3 guys, the tech-savvy Mike, the skeptic Ben, and the somewhat cowardly but curious Alex, looked a little nervous but determined.
The house's doors creaked open as if welcoming them into its embrace. Inside, there was a chill and a musty smell mixed with the scent of old wood and dust. Their flashlight beams picked out bizarre shadows from the darkness, creating the illusion of moving figures. Mike began setting up equipment. Lisa gave instructions, while Ben and Alex, trying to appear unfazed, inspected the rooms. As they delved deeper into the house, a sense of unease grew. In the living room, where, according to rumors, a portrait of the lady of the house hung, whose eyes followed everyone, they found only an empty wall with a faded spot where a painting once hung. "Just tall tales, guys," Ben scoffed, trying to lighten the mood, but his voice sounded somewhat uncertain. Night fell over the town, and the house grew even darker. The only sources of light were their flashlights and the screens of their devices. They split up to cover as much ground as possible. Lisa and Mike went upstairs, while Ben and Alex stayed on the first floor, exploring the kitchen and dining room. Soon, the first anomalies began. Voice recorders started picking up strange noises, like whispers or distant cries. Motion sensors triggered in empty rooms, and thermometers showed sharp temperature spikes, even though there was no ventilation. Alex, who was in the dining room, suddenly screamed. Ben, rushing to him, saw that the table, covered with a thick layer of dust, had been moved from its place, and on its surface was a mark resembling a handprint. "I didn't touch anything, Ben. I swear. It moved by itself," Alex stammered, his face pale. Ben tried to find a rational explanation, but even he couldn't come up with anything plausible. At that moment, Lisa's scream echoed from upstairs.
The guys rushed to the second floor. Lisa and Mike stood in one of the bedrooms, their faces contorted with horror. On the old cobweb-covered bed lay a doll. An old porcelain doll with a cracked face and empty eyes. "It wasn't here. We checked this room. It just appeared," Lisa said with a trembling voice, pointing at the doll. Mike, who was usually unflappable, looked terrified. He pointed to the night vision camera. The recording showed a pale, twisted hand slowly reaching out from under the bed and placing the doll on the bed. Their skepticism began to melt away, giving way to primal fear. They realized these were not rational explanations, but something far more sinister. The deeper they plunged into the night, the stronger the manifestations became. Doors began to slam shut on their own. Creaks echoed from all sides. Shadows moved across the walls, and the whispers grew louder, forming words they couldn't decipher, but which held an unspeakable malice. At one point, when they all gathered in the living room, trying to process what was happening, their flashlights began to flicker, and then went out completely.
The house plunged into utter darkness, only the device screens glowing with a faint green light. And in that darkness, they heard it. Laughter. High-pitched, piercing, full of madness, laughter that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house. It grew louder and louder, enveloping them from all sides, filling every corner of their minds. Then, in the corner of the room, they saw her, a barely visible, translucent figure in an old dress. It was a woman. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes empty, and her face was frozen in a grimace of unbearable pain and madness. She reached out her gnarled fingers towards them, and her lips moved, silently uttering some words.
Panic seized them. Ben grabbed Lisa's arm. Mike tried to turn on his flashlight, but it didn't work. Only Alex, paralyzed by fear, couldn't move. The woman moved towards them, her steps silent, but each approaching step felt like an icy touch. Suddenly, another figure emerged from the darkness, a man. His face was disfigured, his eyes full of hatred, and in his hand he held something shiny. He lunged at the woman, and they dissolved into thin air, leaving behind only cold and the smell of decay.
The guys didn't remember how they got out of the house. They ran without looking back until they found themselves on the street under the light of the street lamps. Their clothes were torn, their faces covered in dirt and tears, and their eyes held an unspeakable horror. They left their equipment in the house, not daring to return for it. None of them ever spoke of paranormal phenomena again. Skepticism was replaced by a deep, inexpressible belief that there are things beyond rational explanation. The old house on the hill still stands there, shrouded in mystery and a curse. Every Halloween night, if you are brave enough to walk past, you might hear faint sounds, whispers, cries, and mad laughter echoing from its boarded-up windows. And who knows, perhaps on one of those nights, if you look closely enough, you might see in one of the windows the pale face of a woman or the disfigured face of a man who still roam its cursed corridors in the eternal dance of their horrifying past.
Good night. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.